If you're running your business and you've tried marketing, I mean, digital marketing, you've actually put together campaigns and you've tried to run them, you've probably felt somewhat overwhelmed. You've probably been confused, wondering where you should put your budget. It oftentimes feels disjointed. And I'm here to tell you that marketing can be simplified. It can be pared down into two primary things. Marketing is content and conduits. And the thing is that everybody sells you, vendors, agencies, freelancers, they sell you tactics before you sell the principles, before they define the principles. And that's one of the reasons why marketing feels so disjointed, or like it just doesn't make sense to you. And you a lot of times end up feeling dumb. The person talking to you, it makes perfect sense to them. And you're scratching your head going, am I the only one that isn't getting this? And if you actually just take a step back and you understand these first two principles, then everything downstream of those two things works a lot better. And so content is the story that you tell. Conduits are the channels that you use to tell them. And like I said, if you get those two things right, and there's a couple things that you have to do, and we're going to talk about those today. There's a couple of things that you have to do before you can get those two things right. But if you get those two things right, then everything else is just kind of details. They will somewhat fall into place for you. Now, before we go any further, I want to just let you know this is the first episode of what is probably going to be a 5-episode series that we're recording on marketing. Now, we won't stop talking about marketing after we finish this series, but we haven't talked about actually getting into channels, running campaigns, and defining them. So I'm really excited to do that today. So let me introduce the Tenfold Founders podcast. We are on a mission to equip faith-led entrepreneurs to build thriving businesses that serve God's kingdom. I am here with my bestie, Josh Staab, who is normally with me. I'm excited to have you here, Josh. How are you doing? How's your week going?
Excited to be here. Yeah, I got this reminder from my son today. He's 6. It says, "Dad is cool." It's a great
understatement
day.
Of the year.
Great week.
Yeah. I do. I love that. My one of the greatest gifts that I ever received was the digital picture frame that I have on the wall right beside me here, and it is truly the gift that keeps on giving all year long, year after year, even more so than the classic Jelly 1-year subscription of the Jelly of the Month Club, a la
Jelly of the Month.
Clark Griswold. The greatest thing is walking into the office in the morning and seeing a new batch of photos showing up on this screen. Do you have a digital picture frame? Have you ever used one of these?
So do they upload it? Like you just get a new, oh, nice.
Yes.
Yeah, that's cool.
So my wife will take pictures that I've never seen before, and she'll upload it to the picture frame. And it's always just such a great way to start the day, or to be in the middle of the day, and I'll recognize them. But yeah, I mean, those little touches from your family that you get during the day are, man, they're just the tops. Capital stuff.
Helps you stay centered. Good content and a good conduit, the paper heart cut out. So.
Golly, this is why you keep getting invited back to the podcast, Josh. Well, good segue. So like I said, the conversation today, and like Josh just reminded us, it's content and conduits. And, I know that might sound oversimplified, but it really is true. If you can learn to tell the story of your brand, if you can learn to tell the story of the value that you derive, and you figure out that voice and that piece, and then you know what channel to use to get it to the customer that you're trying to target, everything else falls into place. So as I mentioned, there's things that you want to do before you try and define that. It's really hard to get those two things correct if you're just sitting in an office by yourself and ideating and scribbling down notes or working on a whiteboard. So you do have to go through some exercises to get there. It doesn't, that's not necessarily step one, but we're going to help you walk through some of those things. And we've got some different frameworks and tools that we'll discuss today that should help you go forward. Before we jump into that, I do want to take a second to just do a quick announcement and update, a quick plug. We recently launched the Tenfold Founders community, and it is going great. We've got members that are moving in. We're getting ready to start running our first cohort. So for those of you who aren't familiar with the Tenfold Founders community, you can go to tenfoldfounders.com. Check it out. Learn what we're doing over there. This is a community of other business owners who are there to serve God through the work that they do, and also be profitable and grow and enjoy and share problems and learn. Josh and I run the cohorts and interact directly with different members. So again, we're so excited for it to be launched. We're so excited to invite any of our listeners to come and join us. So please check it out, the number 10 foldfounders.com. All right. First tool. So when you're getting ready to think about content and conduits, the first tool is the PSA, and not the public service announcement, but the problem solution aspiration. And so this is actually lines up with the first phase of the Tenfold Founders framework that you guys hear me mention all the time, the aspiration piece, except it's not your aspiration. It's your customer's aspiration. And whenever you're selling something, you want the buyer to be thinking about it in an aspirational way, right? You want to think about, you want them to envision this product being a part of how they're achieving their aspirations, whether they're big or small or somewhere in between. The P, as you might have guessed already, is the problem. So what is the problem? You have to, if you're selling a product, there has to be a problem that it is addressing. And I've heard lots of arguments for why, well, this doesn't really solve a problem. It's about elevating, it's about making you happier when you're already happy, or it's about improving a situation. Well, that's solving a problem, right? Everybody wants more, better, good. And so elevating and moving things forward, it's solving the problem of it not already being that good, right? So there's no reason to try and overthink this. There's a problem there. Then there's a solution. There's an embodiment. There's some way that you're delivering value that resolves that problem. And that could be a product, it could be a service, it could be education, it could be it could come in all forms, art, etc. But there must be some solution. And then when you get to that aspiration piece to round it out, the way you want to define the aspiration, the way you want to think about it yourself is try and imagine, put yourself in the shoes of your customer. What does their life look like once they have implemented your solution to the problem? So we love talking about landscapers. I don't know why that is a continual theme for us, but it is. So we'll go back to the landscaper analogy or example. If your yard needs to be kept, the problem is that it's unkept. You don't have the time to take care of it. And when it's unkept, the real problem is that your family is stuck inside and can't enjoy all that outdoor space that you've invested in. The solution is go to get this landscaping company to do it on your behalf. The aspiration is the client sitting on his back deck, watching his children run around playing football or soccer or with the dog or whatever it happens to be. And that day, that image, that vision of it is the aspiration that you want to play into. And so when you do this, you're actually now starting to build that content, right? So the content comes out of that story. Josh, is that making sense?
Yeah, it does. I have another really good example of the PSA. So I think it helps too if you can condense it into the most simplified language that's very clear, that makes the most sense for your customers. Steve Jobs, I think Apple was a master at this. So if we think about the first iteration of the iPod, before that there were CDs, before that there was tapes and everything. But either way, what you had before for music was something that you had to take 10 songs at a time, listen to whatever was on there, and then switch out for another 10 songs. This iPod revolutionized that, but realistically, it's just a hard drive. Like, who cares?
Yeah.
It's hard drive. So problem was not being able to take all your songs on the go. The solution was a hard drive, but that doesn't really speak to the aspiration. But what did was when they took that and said, this is 1,000 songs in your pocket. So framing that problem, solution, aspiration all in one, I just think that's the most beautiful chunk of marketing. Like, hey, it's a hard drive.
Yes.
But yeah, 1,000 songs in your pocket. So thinking about that aspiration as part of the solution and part of the problem you're solving.
Yeah. So I'm a big fan of Peter Drucker. If you've never heard of Peter Drucker, he is you could call him sort of the father of modern management. He works with Fortune 500 CEOs. He really changed the landscape of business over the last 30 years. And one of his quotes is that the aim of marketing is to know and understand the customer so well that the product or service fits them like a glove and sells itself. Right. And so just like what Josh was saying, 1,000 pockets in your song or something, no, 1,000 songs in your pocket. Right. This concept is exactly what people have been trying to solve since the record player, and on through the mini disc player and the tape deck or cassette and CD and everything else. So this is it's such an iconic concept of being able to do that. And the people who love music, it took no more explanation than that.
Yeah.
Josh, I want to back up for just a second. When we think about marketing, we think about the brands that we've worked with or the brands that you've worked with. This idea of content and conduits obviously is crucial, and different brands, whether they do it intentionally or they do it by accident, they might get some of it right, or they might stumble upon the answers. But at the end of the day, if you had to look at the body of clients that you've worked with over your well over a decade of being a marketer, where are you more likely, where have you typically seen the problem? Have you seen it more on the content side, like they're not getting the content right, they don't know how to communicate to the customer, or do you see it more on the conduit side, they're picking the wrong channels, they don't understand where the customer is and how to get that message to them?
Yeah, I think it's a mix of both. So there are so many variables on each one. With the content, there's a million different ways to talk about your product or talk about your service. Sometimes it can be difficult to get inside your client's head. So for the client, to get inside their head and understand what piece of language really made them say, yes, aha, that is exactly what I need right now.
Yes.
Take my money. That's probably the problem there. It's just making sure that the offer is very clear, it's very succinct, it's very understandable very quickly, because there's so many people competing for attention. On the problems that I see when folks are struggling on the conduit side, a lot of times there's a lot of chasing shiny objects. So people will come and say, "Hey, I really want to run meta ads." I'm like, well, this isn't really a great fit for Meta. Meta is more of that millennial plus audience. Maybe you should be on TikTok, or maybe you should be on even Snapchat, or something that's totally different than what you're thinking, just because you saw a lot of success from competitors or from somebody else on the internet that held up the shiny object and said, "Oh, Meta ads are fire right now. Go ahead and put all your money into that." So there's a mix. Sometimes it's difficult to get them both right quickly. It really takes some time, which I love that you said, hey, sometimes marketers will come in and give you all these tactics, and you really just need to spend some time with that foundational piece of the content and conduits, making sure they're aligned.
Yeah, and we're not done with that piece, but I'm curious to dig a little deeper here. So, because from my perspective, I think that a lot of times founders, they've built a content story. Because they're close to it. It's the service that they provide. They know it, and they've probably felt the pain before. And so I typically feel like they've got a decent idea of how to tell that story. They can answer those questions. I don't necessarily know that they have figured out how to tell it in the right conduit. So, this can get a little bit difficult to follow here. But if you're in Meta, or if you're on TikTok, or if you're on YouTube, the content, even though it's the same story, has to be formatted differently to fit those platforms, which you were starting to hit on there. The issue that I see with a lot of agencies, and I'll see if this lines with you as well, Josh, is that they come in and they're specialists at specific conduits. They're specialists at specific channels. Maybe they're great with organic search. Maybe they're great with paid search. Maybe they're great with like I said, YouTube or something like that. And so they want to build your story into that channel before we've even figured out whether or not that is the right channel. And as an agency ourselves on the tenfold growth side, we've been tempted to do the same thing. How do you know when that's happening, Josh? How do you know when an agency is just trying to fit you within their core competency, or is there a way to know?
I think it can be difficult if you're on the other side. I think if you think about it as like a conversation with ChatGPT or
Mm,
AI, AI sounds like the internet because that's what it is. It's just general advice. It's hey, yeah, I know a little bit about that. Like here's the answer, and it's gold because it sounds great. But if you kind of peel back the layers and think about it, like I love the what you were just talking about with the different conduits have different maybe it's length of content or maybe it's how you deliver the value like Facebook and Instagram and TikTok, it needs to be short. Like you need to really condense that. If it's YouTube, people are on there researching, they're on there for entertainment. That can
hmm
be a little bit longer play. So if you look at a script or something that comes back from an agency or a piece of content that comes back from an agency and you're like, oh yeah, this is really great, it really explains my story, but is that somebody that you've actually got their ear and 100% attention in the parking lot? Like that's going to sound really good to them. You have a lot of time with them. You can read what they're looking and their face is telling you
Right.
back,
Body
or body
language.
language. Yeah.
Yeah.
Or is it something that, man, this person doesn't know me from Adam. I'm on Instagram and I have a half of a second to attract their attention, and then another 3 seconds to keep it, and then another 1 second after that. It's if they stay or if they're going to stay or go. It's important to not just take the information that's coming back from those folks and really just do your own audit on, okay, somebody on the other side of this is going to receive this content. Let me put myself in their shoes and then understand how that's going to be received.
Yeah. Well, and so I like, again, we'll keep saying it, but putting yourself in their shoes, for most founders, that shouldn't be too hard. You've probably been on the other side of needing this service, or if you're running a business, you've been delivering this service through someone else's business or something else. So you should have some insight into that. The unlock that I would give you is that you're whether you are going to know or not going to know partially depends on just how good their pitch is, right? If someone's
Yeah.
trying to sell you something and they're really good at it,
Yeah.
they may be able to convince you that their idea is the best. But what's going to give you the best shot at knowing whether or not it's the best is doing the work that we're talking about right now,
Yeah.
right? Do the PSA work, figure out what the problem is, figure out what the solution is, and figure out what the aspiration looks like. Another piece of that, as you're going through the PSA, you need to ask yourself, okay, who has the problem? I have the problem. Okay, who's that person? Okay, who out of those people can use the solution that I have? So you may have a product that you're offering that is, here's just a really, really simple example. If you are doing lawn care, because that's my favorite example for everything. If you're doing lawn care, you can define the problem, right? Unkept yards that don't allow people to enjoy their outdoor spaces. But the people who actually can use your solution, so your solution is to take care of the yard, well, they don't live 2,000 miles away across the country, right? So which will change how you communicate to them. So, for instance, if you know everybody is local, well, you might be thinking about yard signs. You might be thinking about door hangers. You might be thinking about other methods and modes or other conduits, more likely, to communicate that information to them that would not be reasonable at all for somebody 3 states over. They don't care about a yard sign from your last client because they're never going to see it. So again, all of these things are really well connected. So you're asking yourself, okay, who has the problem? Who of the people who have the problem can use my solution? And then when you think about the aspiration piece, this is where you can actually get really creative and have a lot of fun, because the aspiration can look really different, and the way you paint that picture can come across in a lot of different ways. And that will also play into, or excuse me, that will also be partially defined by the conduit. So Josh, I want to shift gears a little bit, and we've been focusing a little bit more on the content side. I asked you some questions about identifying conduit. Let's talk about what our actual process would be if we were trying to define the conduit, not what an agency trying to sell you something would do.
Yeah.
So, uh, what I would typically do, and I'll start, and then I'm going to pass it over to you, Josh. What I would typically do is say, okay, I've gone through the PSA. In each step, I've thought about who this person is. Well, now the easiest thing, the easiest next question is just where are these people? Where are they right now? And honestly, with ChatGPT and some of the other tools that are out there, any of your AI tools, it's never been easier to do some of that research. So if you know that, okay, my customers are going to be people who are between the ages of 30 and 60, who live in central North Carolina, who own a home. Maybe they have household income of between $100,000 and $300,000 for my target. Well, I can now go pump that into one of these AI tools or do some searches and pretty quickly figure out, okay, where are these people likely to be? Maybe maybe for you, you think it's typically whoever's staying home at the house, whoever's at the house the most, whoever's paying the bills, and that might be different depending on where you are in your income brackets and things like that. But you start to define who that person is, and right away, okay, if they're in their 50s, they're probably not on TikTok, but there's a pretty good chance that they're on Facebook. Right? They probably have an account there. So that's the first thing I do. Josh, would you agree with that? Would you do something different?
Yeah, absolutely. Dialing into the ICPs. This is something that with running an agency, where I got started was just creating these large spreadsheets of, okay, here are 6 different ICPs, or blanking on the ICP.
Ideal client profile?
Ideal client profile.
That's
yeah,
right.
Your avatar, your ideal client profile.
Yeah.
So here's 6 different ones. We're going to go, okay, here's what they're doing in the morning. Here's what they're doing in the evening. Here's what they're doing in the afternoon. Here's where they're going to be at those times. Here's what they're going to be interested in. Are they reading a book or a magazine, or aspiring to look on Pinterest because they want their garden in the backyard to look so much better than it currently does now, or maybe they don't have one. Maybe they're aspiring to that. A really good example that I used to love to bring up is Lululemon. They've nailed this 30-something-year-old female that is young professional. She's at the peak of her life. She's girl boss, doing all kinds of awesome stuff. The 20-somethings are looking up to her, wanting to be her. The 30 plus, the 40 plus women are looking back and saying, man, that was a great time of life. I wish I could get back to that. But they're speaking to that one person. So finding out where that person is, the mid 30-year-old female for Lululemon, that's the core foundation of the finding out what those conduits should be.
Yeah. 100%. So I want to evoke the RAD framework. So for those of you who have not been listening with 110% focus and attention to every single one of our podcasts, you may not have heard me talk about the RAD framework yet. I'm not going to go to it in a lot of detail. There's a podcast in the pack that I could maybe help you look up if you want me to do that. But the RAD framework is real, actionable or accessible, and demonstrable. And so what we're saying here is, when you're thinking about your product, this is more of a product development framework. Is the problem that you're solving real? Do you have access to the audience? And can you demonstrate that your solution solves the problem for that audience? So, but let's focus on the A. It's the accessibility piece. So before you start a business, and as you're starting a business, you need to make sure you have access to an audience. And there's a lot of different ways to get access. But in a lot of cases, you already have access through a partnership or through some other past business, through an email list maybe that you've built up, or through a referral system or whatever it is. And if that access exists, that can kind of change everything. It can flip things on their head just a little bit. So typically the content comes first and then the conduit. Well, if you already have predefined access, so let's say you were a blogger first and you were creating entertainment content, and then you came up with a solution that maybe wasn't perfect for your blog audience, but it overlapped really well. Well, you're going to want to use that blog audience, right? So that becomes your conduit. You're going to use that. And what that means is that as you're building out your content and you're building out the story, you want to make sure that it fits and matches where you already have access. Now, if you go through the process of building out your content and now you're thinking about conduits and you realize that my content is really complicated and it's a really long-winded story, but all of my audience is on TikTok. Well, guess what? You're going to have 10 seconds to tell that story. So you're going to have to really figure out how to condense it in a way that communicates. I mean, Josh, that's a really, really hard problem.
Yeah, or go higher. So that's when you
Tell
kind
me
of
about that.
broaden that top messaging.
Yeah.
Start the conversations, because if you need that conversation to be able to interact and tell somebody the depth of your product or service, then just focus on getting that first yes or that first conversation.
Can you maybe map out an example of that? I think that's a really interesting thing that
Yeah,
people may not have thought about before.
yeah, absolutely. This is becoming the way marketing is running now too. It's 2026. People have seen tons of spiels. Their feed on Instagram or their feed on even just rolling down the street, they see 50 yard signs at the same intersection. It's not just put something up and they will come anymore. It's less about the metric of having a customer and maybe more about the metric of that's a person on the other side that I can have a conversation with and have help fulfill a need that they have, make their life better, make their customers' lives better, or make whoever your prospect is. So, something that even we're doing at Tenfold Founders is pushing ads to our Instagram profile, and we're not necessarily trying to sell at that point, or we're really just trying to say, hey, what drew you here? It's really interesting that in your profile, I see you like to fish. I see some awesome fish that you have in your pictures. I actually love to fish. That's, if I wasn't probably doing this podcast, that's what I'd be doing right now. But what about you? Like what's interesting to you? What's your vision right now? Do you have a business? Are you growing a business? Are you interested in business? And it's amazing the conversations that come out of that. And
Yeah.
not only does that potentially lead to a sale down the road or a membership, in specifically for our case into Tenfold Founders, it leads to just other doors opening, and then you find out more about your ideal client profile. It's just, if you start rolling back up into, hey, let's not just go straight for that kill or the sale. Let's go for just having a conversation with another human being on the other side.
Awesome. So one quick quote. So Seth Godin, who, again, if you don't know who Seth Godin is, he is an award-winning author. He's got 20 best-selling books. He's kind of a marketing guru. One of the things he likes to say is marketing is no longer about the stuff you make, but the stories you tell. And that is so true, right? And I mean, that's the iPod again, the iPod. Yeah. That example is right on the money, right? It's about the story you tell, not all the stats and like how much memory it has and all this stuff. It's the story behind it. And what you're talking about and rolling it back up, I think just kind of double clicking, digging down on that a little bit. The idea there is that with online marketing becoming so ubiquitous in all types of marketing and people, and it becoming entirely ubiquitous in how we use the internet, but people are just bombarded with ads on Instagram. They're bombarded with search results ads. Everything has its own ad platform built in, and trying to go for that sale is oftentimes discrediting. So if you come in with like the, hey, buy this thing, it turns people off. So what you want to try and do is focus on starting the conversation, build the relationship first. And if you can figure out, again, and the great thing is if you've done this homework, if you understand the content piece, if you understand the story is how you start the conversation. You start talking about that story. You start talking about the problems and solutions and aspiration. I mean, there's two schools of thought. And Josh and I have had this conversation multiple times, a lot of times about, how you lay out content for a website, for instance. A lot of people want to state the problem real clearly. Sometimes that's the right move. Sometimes setting the emotional tone is the right move, which is normally done on the aspirational side, or talking about the pain point as opposed to the problem. And pain and problem are different, right? The problem is the thing that causes the pain. The pain is the reaction to the problem. And again, the pain is more setting the emotional tone. The aspiration is setting the emotional tone. And depending on what your product is, who your audience is, you're going to want to lean in one direction or the other. And that is, like I said, a lot of times that just takes testing, A/B testing, getting out there. This is where experts can really help, though. So, for instance, working with an agency or a advertiser or marketer who has worked in your industry in the past or who has a history of being successful in your industry can really give you a leg up because they probably have already figured out a lot of these angles. So once you figure out your unique solution and some of your unique value propositions and have defined the unique characteristics of your audience, they can take a lot of their general knowledge and inject that in there and cut out a lot of the experimentation and iteration and move you more quickly towards some solutions. I mean, one thing that I want to just call out right now is if you are getting into marketing and you are going to start spending marketing dollars on channels, and by channels, I mean, you're going to start paying Meta, you're going to start paying Google or whoever the channel, the local print shop, even, you need to be very discerning. You need to, you can burn through money really, really quickly with very little, if any, return. And so, Josh, again, I know I'm kind of putting you on the spot a lot here. How can someone who's kind of taking their initial plunge into marketing, who may not have the budget to go after an agency to work with, how can they protect themselves from ending up, spending thousands of dollars on a bad channel, essentially?
Yeah. The main thing is knowing your numbers. So know how much a customer is worth, that lifetime value of the customer. If somebody buys something for, let's say, go back to the yard example, if there's a $60 biweekly contract, so $120 a month, over the course of a year, we'll make it $100 a month just for easy math. So $1,200 a year. They usually stick around for a year. So that customer is worth to me $1,200 in revenue. I know that I can go and spend, I know my crews are going to cost maybe a third of that. I know that gas and just keeping the lights on and the software of my business is going to make that about half. And we'll just say like, hey, we got half the margin on that. So there's $600 profit to be made.
Yeah, roughly. Mm-hmm.
How much of that are you willing to give up on ads acquiring that customer? Usually that's another third. So at the end of the day, you're making $250 to $300 off of that customer profit. So you just have to have those numbers ready to go to where you can say, all right, then I'm able to spend that $200 on acquiring that customer, at least having that benchmark. Then you can start small on your marketing side. Then you can start tracking, hey, I know if I have 10 conversations and one of those people convert, then I need to spend $200 divided by 10 to have those conversations. So $20 per conversation. And I know that if my ad has to, as you're going through this, you start to figure out what those numbers are.
Yeah.
So that's why you start small at like $5 or $10 and then start, once you really start getting your footing, then you can start increasing. But yeah, I think the mistake a lot of people make is like, hey, I got $3,000 a month I can spend on advertising. And then they burn through it in the first month. And then it's like, wow, that didn't work. And that really hurt because that was $3,000.
Marketing doesn't work. Yeah. And then they decide marketing doesn't work and it's a false negative and they lose out on the ability to scale. Yeah. And so, we're a little bit in the weeds on the channels and stuff, but what Josh is saying about just, if you lay this out and you just write these components down, it's really not that complicated. Anybody can get a baseline on what these numbers look like. He's just doing a basic P&L, projected P&L to sort of figure out, okay, what can I spend on my marketing? The other thing though, if you don't want to jump in the numbers, or if you maybe you already know your numbers and you're still asking yourself what to do, once you get the content down and once you start understanding who the customer is that you want to deliver this content to, there's one channel that's always available. Well, I don't want to say always, almost always available. And that's just your direct one-on-one conversation, right? Go and talk to your customers, but do it with this script in mind. Do it with this conversation in mind. Test how they react to you saying the problem, you saying what your solution is, and you trying to connect with them on how different life is going to be. Natural salespeople they just do this innately, and maybe that's you. If it's not you, no problem. Just make sure that you've really learned the PSA piece and how you're ultimately going to deliver. That's how you're going to tell that story. And then, like I said, if it works, if the narrative works, then it's really just about shaping that narrative for whatever the conduit is so that it fits in that conduit, right? So it fits within that pipe that's going to deliver it out to the other end, which is where your larger pool of potential leads and clients are. So okay, so this is great. Hopefully, some of this stuff is landing for you all. Like I said, the marketing is very difficult, but if you use tried and true principles, you can avoid a lot of wasted dollars and really start to scale your business in intelligent ways. And so, thank you all for listening to this. Like I said, this is the first episode and what I believe is ultimately going to be a 5-episode series. The next 4, we're actually going to look at some of the different conduits and how you would move your content through each one of those conduits, how they serve your business, and how they differ from one another. So each of these next episodes are going to focus on some of those different pillars or conduits or channels that we've been talking about. And again, these are all channels that Tenfold works on and that we manage for customers. So we're always happy to have that conversation with you all if you're interested with working with us. Again, my big call to action here today is I would love for any of you to go and check out the number 10foldfounders.com. Join the community. Let us know what you think. We're just really super excited about that. Josh, any final words on how to wrap up the conversation?
Yeah. As you go, just always look back to the content and conduits, that piece. Just if it ever seems overwhelming, just back up, try down the path again. If you're trying to tackle the marketing side for the first time, just keep it simple. Maybe one or two pieces of content, 1 or 2 stories, 1 or 2 messages, and then maybe one conduit. Start there, then expand.
I love it. Well, as you know, we are here to help you grow businesses. We are also here to praise God and give him our grace. So we'll just close in a quick prayer. Heavenly Father, thank you so much for this opportunity to have another conversation with Josh and myself and our audience. We pray that these words are useful, that they help people to improve the performance of their businesses, and that it would free them up to live their lives in accordance with your will. We pray all this in Jesus' name. Amen. Josh, great to see you. Thank you.
See you next time.